The gala sparkled like a constellation in Manhattan, chandeliers casting refracted light over the city's elite. Every guest moved with careful poise, their laughter and whispered compliments mingling with the soft clinking of crystal glasses. Malik Thompson stood near the grand staircase, a calm figure in a tailored black suit that matched the quiet strength of his presence. His eyes scanned the room, not for attention, not for approval, but for opportunity. Years of being underestimated had taught him to move silently, letting actions speak where words often failed. Tonight, the Carter family's world would collide with his own in ways they would never anticipate. Vanessa Carter floated through the crowd like a storm dressed in silk. The billionaire heir's sister had always been beautiful in a way that drew eyes, but her charm was a weapon sharpened by vanity. When she spotted Malik, she saw not a man, but a canvas for amusement. A photo, she demanded, shoving her phone into the hands of a flustered assistant. Malik, ever composed, nodded politely, allowing himself to be positioned for the picture. He could feel the tension in the air, the subtle currents of judgment and envy swirling around the room. Then came the movement so quick it could have been accidental. Except nothing about Vanessa's arrogance was ever accidental. The red wine sloshed from her glass, dripping in an angry arc onto Malik's crisp jacket, leaving a stain as vivid as her audacity. Gas rippled across the room. Malik froze, a fleeting moment where shock tried to pierce his calm, but he recovered instantly. He dabbed at the fabric with a napkin, eyes locked on Vanessa's, a storm brewing beneath his steady exterior. She laughed, tilting her head, unrepentant, reveling in the spectacle as the room's attention pivoted toward her display. For Malik, humiliation was a foreign language spoken fluently only by those too reckless to see the consequences. Vanessa's smile, bright and careless, was a crack in her armor, one he would remember. In that instant, he understood that tonight was more than a gala. It was the opening act of a reckoning. The world would see her as the beautiful socialite, but he would see her in a light that demanded payback. And payback, he mused silently, did not require anger. It required patience, precision, and the kind of calm that could dismantle a legacy without spilling a drop of one's own dignity. As the laughter echoed and glasses were raised in polite oblivion, Malik straightened, his jacket damp but his resolve unshaken. Vanessa had shown her hand and the game had only just begun. The morning after the gala, the city was buzzing, not with gossip about the wine spill itself, but with whispers about Malik Thompson's poise. Social media had lit up overnight, replaying the incident in slow-motion GIFs. But instead of ridicule, Malik's calm response had earned admiration. Headlines praised his professionalism. CEO handles public humiliation with grace, read one, while another noted, Malik Thompson's composure wins more than just respect. Vanessa Carter, on the other hand, was now the subject of endless memes and snide commentary. She scrolled through the posts, face flushing with anger and disbelief, unable to understand why the world seemed to celebrate his dignity while mocking her recklessness. Malik, meanwhile, moved quietly through his office, a modern glass sanctuary atop the skyline. He had spent years perfecting the art of patience, of turning every slight into an opportunity. The gala was no different. While Vanessa had sought to humiliate him, she had inadvertently given him a platform to shine. A subtle leverage he intended to use. Investors who had once dismissed him were now reaching out, curious and impressed. Calls, emails, and lunch invitations began to fill his calendar. Every message was a quiet affirmation that his strategy, grounded in intellect rather than temper, was working. Across town, the Carter family convened in their boardroom, tension crackling like electricity. The $2.4 billion deal that had been years in the making now felt precarious. Vanessa's antics had cast a shadow over the family's reputation just as negotiations were to begin. The billionaire patriarch fumed, muttering about carelessness, while the rest of the family tried to spin the situation as a harmless accident. But the truth was unavoidable in high-stakes business. Appearances mattered as much as numbers, and Vanessa's indulgent behavior had created a fissure in their foundation. Unseen by the Carters, Malik's influence quietly expanded. He reached out to key stakeholders in the deal, presenting not only his company's capabilities but the unwavering integrity he had demonstrated during the gala. He was meticulous, patient and deliberate, ensuring every move was calculated for maximum impact. The irony was not lost on him. Vanessa's brief moment of arrogance had opened the door for him to seize what could have been theirs. By evening, the game had shifted, though no one yet realized it. The Carters remained focused on spin and image control, oblivious to the quiet storm Malik had begun to orchestrate. Meanwhile, Malik reviewed the investor profiles on his desk, a subtle smile playing on his lips. Revenge, he knew, was sweetest when it was invisible until the moment it struck, and strike it would. The evening air in Manhattan was crisp, carrying the faint hum of luxury and power. Another gala, another crowd dressed in diamonds and silk, But tonight the balance had shifted, invisible yet undeniable. Malik Thompson entered with effortless poise, the faintest trace of satisfaction behind his calm gaze. He moved past the whispers, past the polite nods, directly into the center of the storm he had carefully orchestrated. The Carter family, oblivious until now, fidgeted at the edges, their faces tight with tension. The announcement came with the subtle elegance of a maestro conducting a symphony. Malik's company had secured the $2.4 billion deal, one the Carters had believed belonged to them by default. As the room processed the news, a hush fell over the elite assembly. Cameras clicked, reporters jotted furiously, and in that moment Vanessa Carter's laughter from months before echoed painfully in her own ears. The irony was sharp and immediate. The very man she had humiliated was now celebrated publicly, his achievement a mirror to her reckless arrogance. Vanessa's face betrayed her shock before her carefully constructed mask could catch up. Her lips pressed into a thin line, a mixture of anger and disbelief. She glanced at her family, seeing the panic mirrored in the patriarch's rigid stance. Every advisor she had relied on to salvage the deal now looked to Malik, impressed by the intelligence and strategy that had eluded the Carters entirely. Malik, seated across the room, did not gloat. He allowed the victory to speak for itself. The elegance of restraint made his triumph sting all the more. In the corner of the ballroom, Malik allowed himself a quiet breath of satisfaction. Revenge had never been about cruelty. It had always been about justice and patience. Vanessa had poured wine on him expecting humiliation. He had returned it 1,000-fold, not with anger, but with precision. The Carters' legacy, built on entitlement and arrogance, had been quietly undermined while they remained distracted by their own social games. The media coverage would cement Malik's victory for the world to see, a story of grace under pressure and strategic brilliance. As the evening wore on, Vanessa's composure finally cracked, a subtle tremor in her posture as she realized the cost of her impulsiveness. Malik watched, serene, knowing the lesson had been delivered. The room celebrated him, the elite whispered his name with respect, and Vanessa Carter understood, perhaps for the first time, that privilege without wisdom could not withstand intellect cloaked in calm. Malik had turned a moment of public humiliation into a triumph that would echo far beyond a single gala, a victory crafted with patience, precision, and undeniable dignity. The city lights shimmered through Malik's office windows, painting the skyline in gold and silver streaks. The chaos of the gala had faded into memory, leaving behind only the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. Malik sat alone, the weight of the $2.4 billion victory resting lightly on his shoulders, not as a trophy, but as a testament to patience, strategy, and the power of composure. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the years of being underestimated, the subtle dismissals, and the countless occasions when his talent had been overshadowed by arrogance and entitlement. Tonight, every slight had been repaid, not with cruelty but with precision. The Carter family's fallout was already making waves. Vanessa, once untouchable in her social sphere, now moved through the city with a different kind of awareness. Her arrogance had been replaced by a sharp edge of caution, her confidence fractured by the realization that influence and wealth could not mask incompetence. Malik had not humiliated her directly, he had allowed the truth to speak for itself. Watching the consequences unfold from a distance brought a quiet, almost meditative satisfaction. Justice, he mused, had a far sweeter flavor when served with dignity. As he leaned back in his chair, Malik thought of the subtle irony that had carried the evening's triumph. A spilled glass of wine had set everything in motion, yet it had been his restraint that turned the moment into power. Every investor, every partner, every journalist who had witnessed his calm in the face of public embarrassment had contributed to this victory. Revenge, he realized, was not the act of retaliation. It was the art of turning someone else's recklessness into a stepping stone for success. In the silence of his office, Malik allowed himself a private toast. He raised a glass of water, a small smile touching his lips, thinking of the lessons learned, not just for Vanessa and her family, but for himself. The world would now see him as more than a CEO. They would see a man who commanded respect without shouting, who wielded patience as a weapon sharper than anger. Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the quiet power plays that had just unfolded in its heart. Malik stepped to the window, looking out at the skyline he had conquered in more ways than one. The night was serene, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the calm that came not from wealth or influence, but from knowing that justice, patience, and integrity had carried him further than vengeance ever could. Vanessa Carter and her family had learned their lesson, and Malik had gained more than a deal. He had claimed dignity, respect, and the sweet satisfaction of victory earned on his own terms.